33. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
38 at O'Hare, 35 Lakefront, flurries, and 37 at Midway, and rain in Lansing, 36. Your next news update is at 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
He focuses on Bernie's support for guns as, a rural state senator, with clips from some of his pro-Second Amendment takes from earlier on in his Senate career in the 90s, and when he was, still getting his legs underneath him and locking in his position as United States Senator. When that was no longer in jeopardy, then, of course, he went to the full gun confiscation side, which is where he is now. But, Bernie Sanders, once upon a time, running for U.S. Senator in Vermont, endorsed by the NRA.
Really?
Yeah, it is interesting, though, that Bloomberg, and it'll be interesting to see what happens on tonight's debate, focus on Bernie Sanders' previous support for Second Amendment rights and not focus on his support for previous and current dictators.
Yeah, here he is.
It says something about the Democrat Party.
It's unbelievable.
There was a lot of folks in Cuba at that point who were illiterate. And he formed a literacy brigade. You may read that. He went out and they helped people learn to read and write. You know what? I think teaching people to read and write is a good thing. And by the way, all of those Congress people that you mentioned just so happen to be supporting other candidates, just accidentally, no doubt.
And it just so happens that 80% of Cuba was literate, could read before Castro deposed Batista. But, it's just an accident of history.
Yeah.
But I want to focus on Bloomberg, because Bloomberg, like Soros, has tentacles in a lot of places that reach into a lot of places in our country. We've talked about Soros funding prosecutors at the local and regional level, like, say, Kim Foxx in Cook County, San Francisco, Philadelphia, elsewhere, trying to advance a non-prosecution culture at the state's attorney level. Well, Bloomberg is doing something similar in advance of his various central plan gambits, like prosecuting companies to advance the climate alarmism agenda. And the way he's doing that is by financing lawyers in state attorney general's offices, which presents all sorts of potential conflicts and due process concerns. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Mark Chenoweth, who's the executive director and general counsel for New Civil Liberties Alliance and former chief of staff to one Congressman, now Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mark, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back in Chicago in a way.
Yeah. So we've, as I mentioned, the Soros and Bloomberg parallels here. Soros is focused on states' attorneys who won't prosecute criminals, and Bloomberg apparently is at least partially focused on installing lawyers in the attorney general's offices at the state level in a number of states for the express purpose of litigating based on climate change politics.
That's right, and it's important to make the distinction that this is not a matter of electoral politics. He's not entering into these AG races. He may also be doing that, but what we're talking about isn't him playing in the AG races as a contributor to those candidates. Instead, what he's done is contribute millions of dollars to set up an entity at the New York University School of Law, which is in turn funding special assistant attorney general positions in these state AG offices around the country. And these special AGs are devoted to doing nothing but prosecuting and going after companies for environmental crimes.
And so explain the due process concerns that presents. You're having somebody in a state AG's office who's privately financed versus the state attorney general who they're supposed to report to.
Sure, it's an enormous due process problem for targets of enforcement actions the prosecutor is supposed to be disinterested. They're supposed to be interested in the public good, not just winning the case, but doing justice. And justice sometimes might mean winning, but sometimes at the end of the case, justice might mean that the person's acquitted. And the prosecutor is supposed to be disinterested in that. But here we have people whose jobs depend on finding problems in the environmental area. They don't have the option of looking around and saying, you know what, that's the situation right now is such that that's not really a priority for the office. These folks are being brought in as hammers who are looking for nothing but nails. They have an interest in the outcome of the case because their job depends on having success in these enforcement actions, and that's the very definition of bias. So that's going to affect who they decide to go after, what charges they file, what cases they file, what charges they include in those cases, what settlement kind of proposals they make, and every other aspect of the case.
And so they have, the power of the purse strings isn't with the taxpayers, isn't with the duly elected state attorney general. It's with Bloomberg and the enterprise that he's largely funding. That's
right. The power of the prosecutor is being put up for sale in a sense, and certainly when you have these outside funding streams, the state legislature is either giving up the power of the purse, or in many states, it's not so much that the legislature is giving this up, but that the state attorneys general are going outside of state law. There are ethics laws in many states that prohibit this kind of activity. There are also fiscal laws in many states that require any sort of monies or support coming into the state to go through the Treasury and be dispersed by the state legislature, and don't allow this kind of independent funding.
And so what are, I know Patrick Morrisey, as the Attorney General in West Virginia, has commented on this practice critically. What are Republican Attorneys General doing about this arrangement?
Well, so far, none of them have taken the money. The NYU Center has offered money to both Republican and Democrat AG offices who were willing to pledge to use the money in this way to go after alleged environmental problems. None of the Republicans have taken it. About 11 Democrat state AGs have taken it, including Illinois, if I'm not mistaken.
Of course.
And so it's not a partisan problem in the sense. I mean, my organization is a nonpartisan organization. We would object whether it was Republican or Democrat AGs who are taking the money, but perhaps because it's Mike Bloomberg funding it, it's been the Democrat AGs who have taken it. But can you imagine what would happen if ExxonMobil or Koch Industries were in the business of funding state AG offices? The mainstream media would be going ballistic.
Well, and you point out, too, that one of the things it presents, not saying that this is happening, but it presents an environment where such a conflict exists, and so it prevents an opportunity for ethical breaches. So Bloomberg gets word that one of his finance prosecutors is going to go after company XYZ, so he shorts company XYZ. I mean, it's an opportunity to, not that he needs it, but to make money, or for other people to make money that are associated with sort of the funding stream that goes back to Bloomberg.
That's right. That's one of the ethics problems that's inherent here. We don't know what the particular investments are that Bloomberg has. Perhaps he just has a general investment strategy to invest in alternative energy companies, and so it's to his benefit to drive the stock prices down of companies that he may perceive to be, or whose state AGs can be harnessed into reducing the stock prices of non-alternative energy companies.
Do you think anybody, will bring this up in tonight's debate in South Carolina?
I don't know whether this will come up in the debate tonight. I think it's an excellent question to ask, and it's certainly, when given the ethics problem, it would be fair to ask what the investment portfolio looks like that may be benefiting from this state AG effort.
And if there is a remedy to be had, it's really a state-by-state question regarding state ethics laws. It's not there's not an obvious federal remedy to this.
I think that the federal remedy would be a lawsuit under the Due Process Clause of the U.S. Constitution. So I think anyone who finds themselves as the target of an enforcement action would certainly have standing to object on those due process grounds, as well as the ethics grounds, as well as as you say, the state to state, it may vary in terms of what the fiscal statutes are in those states. And there could also be due process objections under state constitutions.
What kind of concerns do you have, just since I mentioned the parallel of George Soros and him? Now, this isn't a campaign setting, so it's different, and I'm not saying he did anything illegal, but George Soros being behind funding so many prosecutors at the state level and not really getting a lot of media scrutiny outside of some conservative outlets.
And I don't know what the strategy is there, whether it's to build up a bench of folks that can run for higher office. If that's what it is, it's more of a pure electoral play. If there is an effort there to change the prosecutorial priorities of the office, either to go after or not go after certain kinds of offenses, that's where the ethical problems would come into play.
He is Mark Chenoweth, Executive Director and General Counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance, former Chief of Staff to then Congressman Mike Pompeo. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy. Appreciate your having me.
Yep, thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Liberty Mutual Insurance Company presents. And Doug.
Welcome to Burger Palace. What would you like today?
Yes, I'd like to tell you that Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need.
This is Burger Palace. Do you want any food?
Yes, one Palace party meal. No, Limu, they won't put insects on a burger. No, you can't talk to the manager.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
When you're diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer,
a million questions flood your mind.
How can this be happening?
Am I going to be able to work?
What's a subtype?
What do I do now?
We know.
We went through it too.
But once you start to understand your options,
you can partner with your doctor
and find ways to face MBC on your own terms.
Visit findyourmbcvoice.com and learn how to speak up and have a more informed conversation with your doctor.
Some questions have answers.
Visit findyourmbcvoice.com to find some of yours.
You see what I was saying about Rebecca Romaine Stamos?
Wow.
Yeah.
What happened?
We were talking about it off air.
Yeah.
Rebecca Romaine Stamos was in the latest episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
And you hardly recognized her, did you?